Hello, my name is Georgianne Landreth. This is my original contribution for the American College of Education in my capstone experience for special education. I chose co-teaching in special education and differentiation. Co-teaching in special education is a hot topic and a trend in our current climate. In addition to this, differentiation in teaching is evolving due to a variety of attributes. But the drawback I am finding is that there is a gap in knowledge among teaching professionals that are coming into the field with few resources, especially in smaller rural areas. With me having been one of those teachers, I was shocked to discover co teaching and differentiation almost at the same time. ACE contribution, course connection. This topic was chosen as my ACE contribution due to my personal experience and acquired knowledge in co-teaching, special education, and differentiation through ACE. Additionally, relating the coursework to my original contribution is as follows. SPED 5013, a requirement for completion of this class was to understand the categories of exceptionality, essentially building a foundation for the consequent courses. SPED 5043. This is a course that pushed me to fully understand the effect collaboration had on the world of education and everyone involved. Additionally, this is where I first began looking further into co-teaching and its benefits. SPED 5103 was my first class dealing with strict laws that are current of special education. Tying this course into my contribution, one of the main goals of the course was to applicably advocate on behalf of the students and families. That does include offering co-teaching to students with needs when it is seen as the best fit for them. CI 5503. For this course, I learned managerial skills that were applicable to my contribution in the way that they further opened my mind up to the most beneficial ways of teaching our diversified population. I was exposed to several educational models, including the 6 types of co-teaching. CI 5223. This course was fully encompassing of what differentiation was and its history. At several points, dots of information were getting to connect. At one point, co-teaching was of relation. CI 5203. In this course, I put differentiation in action and really pushed myself to analyze the impact differentiation had in special education classroom. Co-teaching did not make an explicit appearance, but I did take the subject into consideration by this point, and I had made the decision to use co-teaching as my original contribution. SPED 5053. Seriously evaluate present matters that may influence the education of students with exceptionalities was the main focus of this course. So moving on to the next slide. Before we dig in, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am from a small rural farming community in Texas. I attended Tarleton State University over in the neighboring town and received my bachelor's. Then I went on to complete a master's program in special education with an emphasis on differentiation through ACE, American College of Education. I am a member of KDP, which is a professional organization that holds membership for historical figures such as Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Howard Gardner. I am also a proud member of CEC, a pioneering organization for special education for the past 100 years. We can thank them for actively supporting and trailblazing laws such as 94 142. The last organization I belong to is ATPE. This organization works tirelessly advocating for faculty, staff, and students in Texas. I have been teaching for a total of 5 years, with my first 2 years belonging to theater and the past 3 years in special education. I currently teach partially self contained with the support of 2 paraprofessionals. I co-teach with anywhere from 5 to 10 general education teachers weekly. Let's dig into this agenda. For this presentation, I have it split up into parts and not slides. This was the most effective way to communicate the information appropriately without overwhelming you. The ideal audience for this presentation would be teachers that are new to the field with less than 5 years of teaching or anyone who is curious about co-teaching, especially teachers that are seeking or have sought their certification through alternate programs. There are a number of us, myself included. This presentation will explore co-teaching from a special education standpoint. Therefore, we have a goal. It is our primary goal, and that is to understand co-teaching and walk away with a full encompassing comprehension of co-teaching in special education and resources to implement co-teaching in your classroom. When I first began teaching and up through my 4th year, I didn't know a lot about co-teaching. It is not a fully and explicitly explored avenue in my geographical location. So, when I began my journey in special education, it was something I simply did and didn't think actively about. So, again, hopefully, this presentation will give you a foundation in which you can build upon for your future co teaching experience. On the right, I have a list that shows we have a total of 9 parts. Let's explore them real fast. Part 1, what is co-teaching? Part 2, what co-teaching is not? Part 3, types of co-teaching. Part 4, effective strategies for implementing differentiation. Part 5, advantages of co-teaching special education. Part 6, common challenges. Part 7, strategies for overcoming challenges. Part 8, why is this important? The takeaway. Part 9, formal references. That will be in APA 7th edition. Part 1, what is co-teaching? Definition: at least 2 educators are placed together for the purpose of teaching a group of students. This can be done in a variety of ways, ultimately sharing the responsibility providing for students' academic needs. Other terms are collaborative team teaching. For the purpose of simplicity of this presentation, we will only refer to it as co-teaching, but just so you are aware, when out and about in the wilds of the world, that is another term that we use. History. Co-teaching began in the 70s in part due to Law 94-142. Today, this law is known as IDEA and has been reauthorized since its induction and is currently known as IDEA 2004. Primarily between licensed teachers of general education and special education, but has since evolved. Content teachers, multilingual teachers, and different types of intervention specialists. I find it fascinating that co-teaching began with special education. Where are my data lovers? With our part 1, I wanted to throw some data out there that you would find digestible. Remember that I told you the main goal was to offer a full encompassing comprehension of co-teaching. Here I have offered a simple graphic that ranks our states by the most approachable to utilizing co-teaching on a variety of levels, including special education. I have also provided the direct link on the left. I encourage you to explore this link because when you hover over each of the states, it gives you more information about the statistics of that state. They even offer the best cities per state for co-teaching. Dr. Lynn Cook created one of the most widely known and used books for co-teaching, known as a special education pioneer. Dr. Cook had a long-spanning career in teaching and dedicated her life to education. She wrote books with editions still in circulation for students at universities seeking a degree in teaching. She contributed to the types of co-teaching along with her co-author, Dr. Friend. Dr. Marlon Friend, dedicated to collaboration, general education, special education, and co-teaching, has authored and co-authored publications still in use in education. And some of those texts are several college texts on special education and co-teaching specifically. Next is Dr. Howard Gardner, known for his contribution to multiple intelligences, helped pave the way for personalized learning. Dr. Gardner's theory of MI is very interesting, and Gardner argues that true learning doesn't occur from people taking information and regurgitating it. True learning happens when several attributes factor into problem solving. He called it multiple intelligence. Dr. Carol Ann Tomlinson, known for a lifetime career in education specific to differentiation, has written several books on differentiation in a classroom and explains differentiation using the content, process, product, and environment model. Additionally, she offers a definitive definition on what differentiation is and is not. Lastly, we have Dr. Wendy Morosky. She has contributed to co-teaching with a series of books that she has written about co-teaching and collaboration. Currently, she is one of the leading professionals in our nation for co-teaching. I had the opportunity to meet her in person. The professional development session I attended with her as the keynote speaker was the first time I was introduced to co-teaching and the adjacent models. She was a very nice individual who was very happy to answer any and all questions I had after the session. I highly recommend her books on collaboration and co-teaching, which will be used as resources in this presentation. So by now, most of you can tell the reasoning in addressing these individuals within this PD. Special education, differentiation, and co-teaching are all pieces of the same puzzle. Now, before we go any further, let's take a brief moment to quickly understand what co-teaching is not. This is a chart that shows us what true co-teaching is versus what co-teaching is not. Push-in is a term some of us might be familiar with or have experienced. Also, it is important to mention that co-teaching, despite the type or model being utilized, is between two credentialed education professionals, not one teacher and one aide or a paraprofessional and a teacher. While that sort of relationship is appropriate, it is not true co-teaching. I'd like to take this time to highlight a few examples from the chart. Usually a specified shorter period of time. This is a push-in approach. The true co-teaching acceptable approach would be that it's usually a longer period of time. For example, the entire class period or the entire block of ELA or math. Next, we have no or minimal prior collaboration or co-planning between the two teachers. Again, this is a push-in technique. What would be more appropriate and more acceptable and beneficial for all parties and ultimately the student would be to have an intensive collaboration and co-planning, which is required of co-teaching. This brings us to part 3, types of co-teaching. There are 6 models that we will discuss in the co-teaching model. To begin, team teaching. The first type of co-teaching is known as team teaching. Team teaching is also known as tag team teaching. With this approach, educators take turns in teaching the class. Next, we have parallel teaching. With parallel teaching, the class is typically split into groups of 2. Parallel teaching is a comfortable introduction. If you are new to co-teaching, then this type would be an appropriate choice for beginners. It's an excellent choice with looking at differentiated instruction due to the smaller groups. It's important to note that the teachers are teaching from the same information at the same time, but once again, that level of agreed upon differentiation exists. I've seen this used in special education many times during classroom observations. Next, we have station teaching. You have at least 3 groups, physical learning stations, and same material / different ways equals differentiation. For station teaching, the class is repurposed into groups of 3 or more with the addition of physical areas designated within the classroom called stations that students visit. The same material is taught in a variety of ways by the teachers, and of course, this equals differentiation. Notably, planning is an integral portion of this co-teaching type. This type of co-teaching is often utilized in special education due to its given structure. Part 3, Types of Co-teaching continued. One teach, one assist. With this model, it is ideal for behavior management in the classroom. Typically, one teacher is primarily responsible for delivering full class lessons while the other teacher is busy actively roaming the classroom and assisting other students during the lesson. Challenges arise with this type of co-teaching, which will be also mentioned later, but in short, one teacher could feel as if they are more of an assistant. To remedy this swiftly, active collaboration and communication are key. Additionally, this model is utilized when dealing with special education students with high needs or students that require modifications and accommodations. Thus, differentiation is occurring within this model. One teach, one observe is a wonderful co-teaching technique that is often employed by student or first-year teachers and fully credentialed mentor teachers. Additionally, this is a model used by special education teachers as a primary means of gathering data on a student or students. Alternative teaching. One teacher provides lessons for a majority of the class, and additional teacher provides lessons to small group that is modified or offers accommodations. Alternative teaching is the last primary co-teaching type for this presentation. Again, we can see how this type could benefit special education and differentiation. All 6 of these co-teaching types offer a level of differentiation, and in addition, some of them are definitely a benefit to special education and differentiation use. So let's take a look at differentiation. Part 4, Effective Strategies for Implementing Differentiation, Content, Process, Product, and Environment. Defining terms and modeling graphic illustrations are a benefit when taking a deeper look at something like differentiation in co-teaching. That is what we are doing here with differentiation. Most of us understand that the differentiation model entails content, process, product, and environment. But I do enjoy a thorough explanation of differentiation. Dr. Tomlinson does a spectacular job of doing this with her book titled The Differentiated Classroom, Second Edition. This illustration helps place us in a positive mindset when looking at differentiation. That is important because our energy, whether positive or negative, is going to not only affect and reflect within us as educators, but echo through everything that we do from our classroom all the way down to our student. Again, I'm offering this visual to you to explore, so I won't be explicit with each box, but you get the gist, and I even appreciate the play on colors. I apologize if you're colorblind. I think my favorites are student-focused way of thinking about teaching and learning for differentiation and what differentiation is. And for what differentiation is not, I think my favorite was dumbing down, teaching for some students. Part 4, Effective Strategies for Implementing Differentiation continued. This visual is from Education Week, and it offers the basic building blocks in bullet point format on the components of differentiation. So this is a model that we primarily use to implement differentiation in our classrooms. This is a beneficial model to keep as a sort of mental mind map when thinking of differentiation. Breaking it down, this is the most effective model for offering differentiation. In the illustration, we have content with the main attribute of what is to be learned. Under the attribute, we have several deciding aspects, such as learner outcome based off standards, and student interests, and varied resource/text. Next, we have process, with the main attribute of how students acquire information. Under that, we have curriculum compacting, scaffolding, and flexible grouping and pacing. Next, we have product, how students demonstrate learning, academic and affective needs addressed, learner style considered. Lastly, we have learning environment with the main attribute of where and with whom students learn. And the aspects are room arrangements, learner responsibility, expand walls of classroom, student interaction, student ownership. Moving along to the next slide, we have Part 5, Advantages of Co-Teaching. Touching on differentiation brings us to the next crucial part of this presentation, and that is the advantages of co-teaching. Addressing the advantages of co-teaching offers a plethora of benefits. For starters, as educators knowing the advantages, we can use them to our advantage and advocate the implementation of co-teaching in our local districts. Another benefit is being able to stay in a positive mindset. Teaching is already challenging for many, and for some, co-teaching can be intimidating in that same respect. But being able to refer back to the advantages of a situation helps ground us as educators and as people, and serves as a guide when navigating stormy waters. The advantages are as follows. Reduced teacher to student ratio. This is especially helpful when looking at special education as there can be a plethora of accommodations and modifications for many of the students in the classroom. Increased instructional options. This allows for differentiation in the classroom to occur and ensures that special education students receive appropriate instruction. Greater student engagement time, less pullouts, and students having a greater connection to their peer group. Modeled teamwork gives teachers the opportunity to learn and grow from one another. It offers collaboration and pushes us to communicate and stay connected. Cut down teacher burnout. It allows balance and more realistic time management. Teachers are in a constant state of organized alertness that can be exhausting. Breaks are necessary. Co-teaching models allow for this to happen. Part 6, Common Challenges. This is Dr. Friend. Remember, she was on one of our previous slides. Again, she's a pioneer of co-teaching. This is an informative video on the realities of working in a co-taught environment. We looked at the positives, so let's look at the negatives. Additionally, I am placing emphasis on the most common challenges. That isn't to say there are more, especially when looking from an individual standpoint. At this time, please pause the presentation and watch the video, then come back to the presentation. Thank you. Part 6, Common Challenges Continued. Administrative understanding, informed admin support. Remember what we just watched? If they don't understand and support it, then it simply isn't sustainable for the educators no matter how well the partnership might operate. Responsibility. What do you do? What do I do? This can be especially challenging when there isn't a definition in aspects of the relationship, be it student rosters, lesson plans, or curriculum. Classroom management, differences in personal teaching styles, opposite in roles, procedures, and/or routines. This can be a challenge when there are a plethora of teaching models and management models. Difficult with any co-teaching type, especially with strong minds in the field of pedagogy. Couple that with teacher responsibilities and personalities, and we get a recipe for a storm. Grades. Who is responsible for what student? Boundaries of student individualized grades. I was talking to a friend in a different district in another state, and they told me, George, I asked the principal who was responsible for grades, and they stood there and dismissively told me, I'm sure y'all can talk it over and figure it out. They smiled and left. Folks, it's a top priority when co-teaching that you ask who is responsible for grades and to what degree. Another aspect of grades being a common challenge is the disagreements that can arise with student grades. One teacher may feel like the other is being too lenient or too hard on a student, or when grading a teacher might override a grade or two, which we all know can skew data rather easily. Next is cohesive planning time for both adjacent planning periods or conferences and duty-free. This challenge seems like a no-brainer that admin would be able to set for the co-teaching partnership, but unfortunately, in today's educational climate, it's not that administrators don't want teachers to have adjacent or duty-free planning periods, but it's becoming less and less feasible. Nevertheless, educators must advocate for themselves, and this is one more attribute of this common challenge. Continuing on our next slide, Part 7, Strategies for Overcoming Challenges. There are many strategies for overcoming these challenges. However, oftentimes they can be funneled into a few priority categories. For the purpose of this presentation, we are going to look at collaboration, communication, and differentiation. Collaboration. Set boundaries within the classroom and within the relationship. This includes administrative relationships. Create strategies for everything from IEP meetings to solving problems/conflicts. Hold meetings for planning. Having routines and procedures set in place aid greatly in the reassurance of appropriately co-teaching. After all, collaboration is also about perspective. Communication. Listen, say what you mean, and state your opinion. Hold meetings for active reciprocation of information. In communication, there are many ways to communicate to individuals, but going beyond that, be exact with your communication and always tell the truth. A good example would be that if you have a different opinion from the group, don't simply agree to what they say during a meeting when they ask you. Don't give in to peer pressure. Advocate for yourself and tell them how you feel or what you think. Lastly, differentiation. We have be flexible, be adaptable. Utilizing differentiation in a co-taught classroom has many challenges, but many of them can be overturned by the ability to be flexible and adaptable. This is another way differentiation comes into play. By differentiating a co-taught classroom, more opportunities for students to learn and engage take place. Moving on to the next slide. Part 8. Why is it important? As educators, it is our duty to learn and adapt to the coming ages. It is up to us to mold the minds of tomorrow and set precedents on taking part in producing individuals that are worthy of themselves and contribute to public society being the best version of themselves they are possible of. So here's the takeaway of this presentation. Defined co-teaching and differentiation. We explored/discovered important attributes of both. And we discovered and/or explored the benefit that co-teaching hosts to special education and differentiated learning. And lastly, we have ways to navigate the common challenges that arise. And lastly, we have our resource slides. Here's the slide for my references. I encourage you to use them for your benefit. Lots of good reading material on co-teaching and special education and differentiation that is interactive from an active teacher's standpoint. Resources continued. Here's the rest of my resource list continued, again in APA 7th edition format. Also, many of these texts have striking visuals, so for you visual learners out there, that is something to keep in mind. Lastly, I want to give you a big thank you for viewing my presentation. Below is my LinkedIn and personal email for questions or comments. Please comment below and let me know what you think about this presentation. Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe.